I never thought a trip to Target could unravel me. Not until that Tuesday in Ann Arbor when the sky was the color of wet concrete and the air had that damp, late-fall chill that seeps right into your bones that I was with Chloe, who worked in the graphic design department 2 floors below mine, who had laugh lines around her eyes that deepened when she smirked, and who wore this specific vanilla and bergamot perfume that made my head feel light every time she leaned in to show me something on her phone. We were just grabbing stuff. That's the thing. It was mundane. A new set of towels because mine were frayed and sad, some fancy coffee pods her machine required, a 6-pack of those gross-looking sparkling waters she loved. Normal life stuff. We'd been flirting for months, this slow, office-appropriate dance of lingering by the coffee machine and sending memes back and forth on Slack. This was the first time we'd hung out outside of work, a fact that was making my pulse thrum a little harder than usual. I remember watching her as we walked from the parking lot toward the automatic doors. She had on these dark, tight jeans that hugged every curve of her hips and thighs, and a cream-colored sweater that was just loose enough to hint at the shape of her breasts underneath. Every time she took a step, the denim stretched taut across the backs of her legs, and I had to force my eyes away, feeling a hot, guilty flush creep up my neck. It felt wrong to be looking at her like that, like I was reducing her to just a body, but I couldn't help it. The desire was a low, persistent hum in the background of everything, a distraction I was constantly wrestling with. The Target on Ann Arbor Saline Road is like every other Target, a cathedral of consumerism with that specific sterile smell of new plastic and floor cleaner. The lights were overwhelmingly bright, humming overhead. We got a cart, one of the big ones with the wobbly wheel that clacked rhythmically as we pushed it, and started our loop. Chloe was a browser. She'd pick up a candle, smell it, make a face, put it back. She'd run her fingers over the soft throws in the home section, holding them up to her cheek. I was just happy to be next to her, to have the excuse to be in her orbit. I'd catch glimpses of her profile, the clean line of her jaw, the way her bottom lip was slightly fuller than the top. I imagined what it would be like to kiss her, right there between the seasonal aisle and electronics. The thought was so vivid, so inappropriate, that I had to cough and look at my shoes. "You okay?" she asked, her voice laced with amusement. "Yeah, fine, just dust," I mumbled, feeling like an idiot. We filled the cart with our useless, necessary things. The whole time I was hyper-aware of her proximity. The accidental brush of her hand against mine when we both reached for the same bag of coffee. The way she'd bend over to look at a lower shelf, giving me a heart-stopping view of the curve of her backside. My mind kept drifting into dangerous, explicit territory, and I'd have to physically shake my head to clear it, the guilt returning each time. It was a loop of attraction and self-reproach, and it made the whole experience feel intensely charged, like the air before a lightning strike. Finally we were done. The cart was full. We made our way to the checkout lanes. It was a Tuesday afternoon, so the place was dead. Most of the traditional lanes were closed, their lights off, belts stilled. A few self-checkout stations were open, their screens glowing a soft blue. "Self-checkout?" Chloe asked, already steering the cart toward them. "Sure," I said, faster. There was one other person using the stations, a man a few kiosks down from the one we chose. I didn't really register him at first. He was just a shape in my periphery. Tall, thin, wearing a dark coat. He was finished, just standing there, staring at his own receipt as we started unloading our cart onto the conveyor belt of our machine. Chloe started scanning. Beep, beep, beep. The mundane sound of commerce. I was bagging, trying to be efficient, folding the towels so they'd fit neatly. I was focused on the task, on not looking like a clumsy fool in front of her. That's when I felt it. A presence. The feeling of being watched is a primal thing, a cold trickle down the spine that bypasses all logic. I glanced up. The man was still there. He hadn't moved, but now he was looking directly at us. Not a casual glance, but a fixed, unnerving stare. His eyes were a pale, washed-out blue, like faded denim. He had a gaunt face, all sharp angles and sunken cheeks, with skin that looked waxy and sallow under the store's fluorescent lights. His hair was a nondescript brown, thinning at the temples. He wasn't old, maybe mid-40s, but he carried a weight of weariness that made him seem ancient. He was just staring. His expression was completely blank. Not hostile, not friendly, just empty. As if he were observing insects under a glass. I quickly looked away, a knot of discomfort tightening in my stomach. Asterisk don't be weird asterisk, I told myself. Asterisk he's just waiting for someone that he's zoning out that you're being paranoid because you're with a beautiful woman and your brain is fried. Star. Chloe, oblivious, finished scanning the last item, the weird lime cucumber sparkling water. The machine screen flashed total, $147.38. Your turn, she said with a smile, nodding toward the card reader. I got the last trip. I fumbled for my wallet, my fingers suddenly clumsy that I could still feel the man's gaze on the side of my face that it felt heavy, physical, like a pressure that I slid my card, heard the beep of acceptance. Please take your receipt, the automated voice chirped. The printer whirred and began to spit out the long, curling slip of paper that it just kept coming, and coming, usually it's a foot long max. This one was spooling out onto the floor, a continuous snake of white paper covered in dense, tiny type. Whoa, Chloe laughed. Did you buy out the store? Geez, what a waste of paper. The machine finally finished with a final mechanical grunt. The receipt was easily 3 feet long that I bent down to gather it up, my cheeks burning with embarrassment. The man was still watching that I could see his worn brown shoes in my peripheral vision that he hadn't moved an inch. Let's get out of here, I said, my voice coming out tighter than I intended. I crumpled the massive receipt into a ball, shoved it into the bag with the towels, and grabbed the cart that we walked out, the clacking of the bad wheel the only sound between us for a moment that I didn't look back, but the skin between my shoulder blades itched with the certainty that those pale eyes were following our every step until the doors slid shut behind us. The cold air outside was a relief that I took a deep breath, trying to shake off the weird, claustrophobic feeling. That was strange, Chloe said, pulling her coat tighter around herself. The movement pulled her sweater tight across her chest, and I had to force my eyes up to her face. What was that guy inside that he was staring at you like he knew you? So she had noticed. The confirmation made my stomach lurch. Yeah, weird. Probably just a creep. She shrugged, but she looked unsettled. Yeah, anyway, you owe me a coffee for making me carry the heavy water. I laughed, the tension breaking. Deal. We loaded the bags into my car and drove to a little indie coffee shop a few blocks away. The whole time I could feel the balled-up receipt in the bag in the back seat like it was emitting a low-grade radiation. That it was stupid, that it was just a glitch, that a paper jam or a software error. But the image of that man's hollow stare was burned onto the back of my eyelids. Over lattes, the weirdness of Target began to fade, replaced by the easy, flirty rhythm we usually had. She told a funny story about a client who wanted a logo that was aggressively beige, and I made her laugh with an impression of our micromanaging boss that I was captivated by her duppy why, the way she tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear, revealing the delicate line of her neck. By the way her lips curled around the rim of her coffee cup. The fear from the store receded, replaced by that familiar aching want that I found myself wondering what her skin would feel like under that sweater. The thought was a jolt of electricity, thrilling and shameful. Here I was, sitting in a cozy coffee shop, and my mind was undressing her that I took a scalding sip of coffee to punish myself back to reality. It was only when I dropped her off at her apartment building that the feeling returned, that as she gathered her bags from the back seat, her fingers brushed against the one containing the towels and that absurd receipt. You might want to check that, she said lightly. Make sure they didn't charge you for a spaceship or something. Will do, I said, my voice a little too hearty. She leaned in through the passenger window before she left. For a heart-stopping moment, I thought she was going to kiss me, that I could smell her perfume, see the tiny flecks of gold in her green eyes, that my whole body went still. Thanks for the coffee, Mark, she said softly. I had a really good time. Me too, Chloe, that we should do it again. She smiled, a real genuine smile that reached her eyes. Yeah, that we should. Then she turned and walked away. That I watched her go, my eyes glued to the sway of her hips, the confident click of her boot heels on the pavement. The desire was a physical ache. That I waited until she was inside before I drove away, my hands trembling slightly on the wheel. When I got home to my quiet beige apartment, I unpacked the bags mechanically, towels in the linen closet, coffee pods in the machine, waters in the fridge. That I left the crumpled receipt sitting on the kitchen counter next to my keys. That it was a white, accusing lump. That I tried to ignore it. That I made dinner, watched some mindless TV, scrolled through my phone. But my eyes kept drifting back to IT. That IT was just paper. That IT was nothing. Finally, with a sigh of exasperation at my own irrationality, I walked over, smoothed it out on the countertop. That IT was wrinkled, but the text was perfectly clear. That IT was itemized, all right. But not with towels and coffee and sparkling water. The first few lines were normal. Towels set charcoal gray $24.99, sparkling water 6 pk $5.49. Coffee pods, dark roast $9.99. Then it changed. The next line read, item. Failing to visit grandma the weekend before she died $00.00. I blinked. Read it again. A cold knot formed in my gut. What the hell? It was a mistake. Some bizarre prank. A misprint. It had to be E.my eyes scanned down the list. The items continued, a mix of my actual purchases and these other things. Item. Line 2 about dentist appointment to get out of family dinner, October 2012 $00.00. Item. Not standing up for Jenna or when kids made fun of her stutter in 7th grade $00.00. Item. The thing you did with your cousin's diary, age 14 $00.00. My breath hitched. No one knew about that. I had never, ever told a single soul about finding my cousin's diary, reading her most private, anguished thoughts about her body and her crush on her English teacher, and then, in a fit of childish cruelty, leaving it open on the kitchen table where her mom would find it. The shame of it had haunted me for 20 years. It was my secret. My private, awful regret. My heart was hammering against my ribs now. This wasn't happening. This was impossible. I kept reading, my eyes racing over the tiny text, the list growing more and more specific, more intimate. Item. Pretending to be asleep when dad came home drunk and crying, age $10 $00.00. Item. Telling Sarah you loved her just to get her into bed, junior year, $00.00. Item. The $20 you stole from your sister's purse to buy weed $00.00. Item. Wishing for one terrible second that your brother hadn't survived his car crash $00.00. I made a choked sound and stumbled back from the counter, my hand over my mouth. This was a nightmare. A sick, twisted joke. But who? Oh. My mind was racing, a frantic animal in a trap. Chloe? Did she set this up? But how could she know these things? No one knew these things. My eyes fell on the bottom of the receipt. The list ended, but there was a final line, printed in slightly larger, bolder type. Total emotional debt, $347,882.17. Payment due. In full. I stared at the numbers. They were meaningless and terrifying all at once. Emotional debt? Payment due? What did that mean? A sharp, electronic buzz made me jump a foot in the air. It was my phone, vibrating on the counter next to the receipt. The screen lit up with a notification. Unknown number, did you review your statement? I recoiled from the phone like it was a snake. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a joke. This was something else. Something very, very wrong. My fingers shook as I picked up the phone. I didn't reply. I just stared at the message. A minute later, another buzz. Unknown number, some items are non-negotiable. I threw the phone down on the couch. I was breathing in ragged gasps. I paced my small living room, running my hands through my hair. This was insane. I was hallucinating. I had to be. Maybe I'd hit my head. Maybe I was dreaming. I went to the kitchen sink and splashed cold water on my face. The water felt real. The linoleum under my feet felt real. The receipt, lying innocently on the counter, felt horrifyingly real. I had to get rid of it. I snatched it up, crumpled it again, and marched to the garbage can under the sink. I shoved it deep into the trash, covering it with coffee grounds and an empty yogurt container. There. Gone, out of sight. I stood there, leaning against the counter, trying to calm my racing heart. It was just a piece of paper. It couldn't hurt me. My phone buzzed again from the living room. Once, then again, and again. A relentless series of vibrations. I walked back in, a sense of dread weighing down my every step. I picked it up. The screen was filled with notifications. Unknown number, the garbage is not a valid payment method. Unknown number, the debt remains. Unknown number, we will be in touch to discuss repayment options. Unknown number, soon? I let out a sound that was half sob, half groan. I blocked the number. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely navigate the menus. Asterisk blocked star. There. Done. Silence. The silence in my apartment was suddenly deafening, thick and heavy. I could hear the hum of my refrigerator, the faint rush of traffic from the street below. Normal sounds, but they felt like a veneer, a thin sheet of ice over something black and deep and waiting. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, every creak of the building making me jolt. My mind was a whirlpool of every shameful thing I'd ever done, every regret I'd ever buried. The receipt had dragged them all into the light. I thought about Chloe, and the attraction I felt for her now seemed tainted, intertwined with this crawling horror. I imagined her body, the curve of her waist, and the thought was immediately followed by the memory of the line on the receipt, telling Sarah you loved her. Just get her into bed. The two things got mixed up together, desire and guilt, want and shame, until I felt nauseous. The next morning I was a wreck. I called in sick to work, my voice a raspy croak. I couldn't face anyone. I couldn't face Chloe. What if she knew? What if this was all some elaborate, cruel test from her? I avoided my kitchen. I couldn't look at the trash can. I drank water from the bathroom tap. Around noon my doorbell rang. The sound was like a gunshot in the silent apartment. I froze, my heart leaping into my throat. I crept to the door and looked through the peephole. There was no one there. I unlocked the door and opened it a crack. The hallway was empty. But on my welcome mat lay a small, flat, rectangular box. Plain brown cardboard, no label. I shouldn't have touched it. I know that now, but a morbid, terrified curiosity compelled me. I brought it inside, locked the door, and set it on my coffee table. I stared at it for a long time. It was just a box. It couldn't bite me. With trembling fingers, I tore it open. Inside, nestled in white tissue paper, was a photograph. It was me. Taken last night. I was in my living room pacing, my face a mask of anguish and